Kakadosh Boker Or Masechet Zevachim Daf Tzadik Daled Amud Aleph 94a1 says the Gemara. We were talking about right now all the different types of the clothing, right? Whether it's going to be, you remember we asked Minayin Lerabot Sak. How do you know that it's going to add a sackcloth or any other types of clothing as well? Tamul Omar, because it says in a pasuk, right? Asher Yizeh Alea Techabes, right? That which you're going to sprinkle in it, you're going to wash a clothing. So Yachol, okay, 94a. So Yachol, I would have thought to say, right? Shani marbe or, right? I would have thought to say that I'm going to include also the skins, mishuvshat, once it was skinned. Okay, Tamulomar comes teach you beged. What does that mean, beged? Ma beged advar mekabel tuma. Just like a clothing has to be something which is going to be mekabel tuma the way that it is. So too, we're talking about something which is davar mekabel tuma the way that it is. Right now, if it's not going to be mekabel tuma, right? So therefore, since the skins, when it's skinned from the animals, not mekabel tuma, you do not have to wash the skins, even though it got the blood on it. Remember, we're talking about when blood comes and splashes on the clothing. So we said that you have to come and you have to wash the clothing. So he says, in this case, since the skins do not mekabel tuma the way that they are, so therefore you do not need to come and to wash the skins. My benai, what's the difference between the different clothing? Abaye says, matlit pechutat shalosh ikabanau. The difference between them is going to be if you have a clothing, a cloth, which is going to be 3 fingers by 3 fingers, right? But remember, the smallest size to ever be considered a clothing is 3 fingers by 3 fingers. If it's smaller than that, it's not considered a clothing. Okay, it has to be 3 fingers by 3 fingers. So, Manda Amar Ra'ui, according to the Mandamar that says that it's fitting to be Mekabel Tuma, this is also fitting to be Mekabel Tuma, right? Because it's still called the Beged, right? So he says, Dibai Chashiv Ale, because you can make it Chashuv, and therefore that's it. It's going to be a Beged. But Mandamar, but if you're going to tell me that it's Davar Mekabel Tuma the way that it is, this is not going to be Mekabel Tuma, right? Why? He comes and he says, because this is going to be such a small shiur, so it's not going to be Mekabel Tuma. Okay, Rava Amar. Rava comes and he says, right, beged shechishev alea letzura. When you have a beged that comes, right, and he's going to be choshev alea letzura. What does that mean? You're thinking about it, right, only to put tzurot on it. Tzurot meaning, many times you come and you take a clothing and you want to put on it different types of how do you call this? You want to put the decorations and all those things and everything. So he says like this. He says Manda Amar, according to the Manda Amar that he says right now, that in order to be chayv, it's going to be ra'ui. It is ra'ui. The Bible, if you want, you can be mvatel lemachshavteh. But Manda Amar davar mekabel tuma. It says hashta mi alav bat kibul tuma. But right now, it's not going to be mekabel tuma. Meaning this beged that is fitting to put these. How do you call it? Like it's embroidery and all these things. Oh yeah, embroidery, no? Embellishment. Thank you. Chazak Baruch. So give it to Ronan. There you go. So he says, right? He says that is the third shita. Okay. So he says, Rava Amar. Rava comes and he says, right? Utzba dechashiv ala lekatzeai kabenaihu. He comes and he says, there's a machloket, right? He says, there's going to be a machloket. So since it was going to be fitting for this embroidery, so he comes and he says, right now it's not going to be mekabel tuma. Rava comes and he says, Utzba dechashiv ala lekatzeai kabenaihu. The machloket between them is to do with a piece of cloth, right, which is going to be used as a carpet. He says, why? Manda Amar Ra'ui, according to the Manda Amar that says that it's going to be fitting to be Mekabel Tuma, it's fitting to be Mekabel Tuma, right? Why? Because this is going to be like a carpet. But Manda Amar Davar Mekabel Tuma, Hala Mekabel Tuma the Mekatzala, but it doesn't become Mekabel Tuma until it's Miyuchad for the carpet. Right, V'atanya, as we learned in a Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Asya Omer, Utzpa shechashav ala lekatza teora ad shiktsiena, which means until you don't make it into the carpet, it's not going to be mekabel tum'ah the way that it is. Okay, fine. So we're on the 2 dots. 2 dots in the middle of Tzadid Daled Amud Aleph. Okay, en ta'un kibus. We just said that you don't need kibus, only the place of the blood, meaning you just have a clothing right now where the blood came and it splashed on it. Now, obviously, the blood had to be in a klishadet, it had to be fitting for haza'ah, and now it gets on the clothing. So you have to wash the clothing. Do you have to wash the entire clothing? Or do you just have to wash the spot where it got dirty? So says the Gemara, right? The Mishnah already said, En taum kibus el makom adam. Only the place of the blood. So nowadays that we have this Tide, whatever it is, and you imagine you're going to come, you're going to take it, you're going to do like this, right? And exactly, you're just going to take off that dot or whatever it is, that spot or wherever the blood is. So says the Gemara, Menaha namine, right? How do we know these words? Titanu Rabbanan, but we learned to the Braita, Yachol nitana nitzat beged ye kol beged taun kibus. I would have thought to say that if it's going to be nitaz on part of the beged, that the entire beged would need to be done washing. Tamulomar comes to teach you, Asher yizeh aleal techabes. What does that mean? Lo amarti lecha lemakom adam milvad. When it says Asher yizeh alea techabes, it's coming to teach you that it's only going to be the actual place of the spot and not anywhere else, right? That's what it's teaching, that raket makom, raket oto makom, right? Because if it would have just said Vasher yizeh midamala beget techabes, that's fine, but he doesn't say that. It says Asher yizeh alea techabes. So therefore, it's alea on the beg. I already know it's on the beg. But he said no, just on that. So you have to be mechabes only that place. Okay, next two dots. ודבר שהוא ראוי לקבל טומאה. So he says stama Rabbi Yehuda. So the stam tana is like Rabbi Yehuda, that in order to be mechayev kibus, right, in order for it to be mekabel tuma, is even if it's not going to be mekabel tuma, right, before. Okay, that means that's going to be like the stama, like Rabbi Yehuda, not something which is ra'ui lekabel tuma, dvar mekabel tuma. So that was what we learned in the beginning of the day today. Okay, next we said, what about now? It does not need kibus, ela ra'ui lekibus. So he says, lemiute kli davar greidahu. What does that mean? He comes and he says, when you have a very strong utensil, for example, let's say a kli etz or matechet, that usually you come and the way that you clean it is you scrape it and not through kibus. Meaning certain things you come, you wash. Many times if it's going to be like wood, you just shave off the first, you scrape off, you shave off the first layer, and now that's it. Now it's clean, right? You don't have any problem. So that's obviously coming to exclude, right, this concept of the keli, because this keli is not ra'ui lekibus. Okay, next two dots. Echad beged ve'echad sak. So we said whether it's going to be a beged of sackcloth, or right, of or a sackcloth, or of or. So all these things, they need kibus. Okay, and all these things. So he says, lememra de or bar kibusu. Are you going to tell me that you could wash leather? Why? Because there's a special halacha to do with leather, right? To do with that it gets cleaned very easily, right? And then maybe there's no even kibus at all, right? So he says like this. He says, meaning we have a contradiction. Yeah, let's see. He says, Haita alav lishleshet. What happens if you have a lishleshet on Shabbat? So you've got lichluch on Shabbat. Mekancha besmartut. You're allowed to just wipe it off, right, with the smartut, but without water. So imagine, Ilchot Shabbat now, right? So Ilchot Shabbat. You got dirty. What do? Take a towel, right, and just dry it off. Haita shel or. If it's going to be or, noten elea mayim ad shitchle. You could put water. Blish l'shafshef, right? But you're allowed to come and just put water. So it's mashma from here, right? That he says over here, there's no isur of putting water on or in order to wash it on Shabbat. So it's because there's lo shayach kibus ba'or, meaning something of leather, right? There's not shayach kibus. So if there's no problem, so this is ilchot Shabbat. So Amar Abaye says lakash. That's not a question. Harabbanan ha'acherim. What does that mean? The Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat is going like Shitat Chachamim, which we're going to bring down right now, right? And the like Chachamim, and not like the Acherim. The Tanya we learned in the Braita, right? If right now the dam chatat comes on the beged or on the sack, so mechabso, you just wash it. If it's going to be kli, ve'or megaredo. If it's going to be on the kli or megaredo, right? You just scrape it off. Acherim omrim, other people say ala beged vasak ve'or mechabso. You just wash it. V'im zala kli megaredo. If it's going to be on a utensil, that's when you're going to scrape it off. Which one? No. This is dam chatat, right? Dam chatat. So now he comes and he says this. So therefore, you see from here, there's a machloket chachamim and acherim. Is there a chiyuv of kibus on or that the blood of the chatat came on the or? So it's for sure that the machloket is going to be, is or bar kibus or not bar kibus? Meaning, is it shayach kibus by or not? Right? So he says, "Kiman azah hada amar Rav Chia bar Ashi." So who does it go like when we say that which Rav Chia bar Ashi says, "Zimnin sagina v'kayimna kamed Rav." That a lot of times we were in front of Rav, v'shechshich ele mesane b'maya, and we come and we started washing his shoes on Shabbat. Yeah, and he never said anything. So Kiman, who's it saying? Who's it going like? Like Rabbanan, because again, if it's like Rabbanan hold that or there's no problem of kibus. So if there's no problem of kibus on or, so therefore on Shabbat I'm allowed to pour water on it. There's no problem. Yeah, one more time. If it's a problem of kibus, I can never pour water. You get dirty. What are you allowed to do? Take a dry smartut, to take a dry rag or whatever you want, and wipe it off. That's if it's going to be a problem of kibus. So whether it's going to be a clothing, whether it's good, that's a problem. But if it's going to be of or, what are you allowed to do? Pour water on it. So therefore, he says, yes, it's a problem. Yes, it's a problem. Yes, yeah, Shabbat, Ilchot Shabbat, Ilchot Shabbat, Ilchot Shabbat. Yes, it's a problem. Right, even without schita. Schita is a different avira, right? Kibus and kibus ele b'mayim. The fact that you put water in itself is already considered part of a cleaning process. Salt for sure, but even without salt, but even without that, even water, not allowed to. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava comes and he says, Umika lemanda Amar, or lav bar kibusu. He says, does there exist somebody that says that it's not bar kibus? He says, Vakti va'beged o asheti o erev o chol kelior asher techabes. Here it says, abeged o asheti o erev o chol kelia or. Here it says, mefurash or. And what does it say? Asher techabes. So that means it's mashma from the Torah, that the Torah is writing to you, that there does exist the concept of kibus by or. So says the Gemara, Elamar Rava, but rather Rava says, Kra umatznitin berakin, right? The pasuk, right, that speaks about this, or our Mishnah that's speaking about this, he says berakin. We're talking about when it's going to be soft, right? Soft or. So he says, so if it's going to be soft, so there's a problem of kibus. Kiplige, when is there a machloket, right? Bekashin, beor kasha, meaning when you have hard leather. If it's soft leather, yes, there's shayach kibus. But if it's going to be hard leather, then not. So says the Gemara, and that which Rabbi says, and I did wash his shoes with water. He says, bekashin. We're talking about a hard leather, and that's going according to the rabbis. And therefore, since it's going according to the rabbis, hard leather, you're allowed to come and just pour water, and there's no problem. Again, you're not allowed to scrub it, but you're allowed to pour water, and by pouring water, it's just going to come off. There's no problem whatsoever. Okay? Now, he's going to explain the pasuk, though. Hadaram Rava, then Rava came and he retracted, and he says, Lam milta amri. It's not the explanation in the pasuk over there. Why? Neku neima lekra. Right? Dechi ketivan berakin ketivan. Does anybody tell you in the pasuk that we're talking about orach? Meaning the pasuk just told you that there's a concept of or, and then it says that there's going to be a problem of techabes. Not a problem. You have to be mechabes over there, because there we're talking about the or of the tzarat. Okay, so therefore, so there's kibus and there's or. Did anybody ever tell you that there we're talking about only which type of or? No, if it's rach, if it's kashe, nobody ever said anything. So therefore, he says, Milo askinan bekli achlasgiya. He says that we're not talking about it with the keli, which is coming from or, which is cooked, which is hard, and it's coming from dinata yam. So the pasuk says, right, nibai kibus. So you still need to do kibus. Ela amar Rava, but rather Rava comes and he says like this: Tzaraat, kevan de migufe kaparcha. Since the tzaraat is coming from the clothing itself, mechalchalele, it softens it. Umashvi lerach, and it makes it rach. Meaning like this. He wants to say like this. Really, be'emet, in the pasuk in tzarat, it's any type of or. It's written over there, techabes. So it's mashma that there's shayach kibus in any type of or, even in or kashe. So he comes and he says, yes, you know why? Where does the tzarat come from? The tzarat is not an external dirt. We were talking about kibus. You've got an external dirt, and now you're going to come and you're going to clean it off, correct? That's something else. And there we're making a differentiation between soft and hard types of leather. Here he comes and he says that tzarat comes from within the same clothing. So since it comes from within the same clothing and it's not something external, it makes it softer. So even if you've got a hard leather, the tzarat, which is coming from the inside, makes it soft. So since it's going to make it soft, right? So therefore, since it's going to come and it's going to make it soft, so therefore he says it's a different halacha. Okay? So he says, Amar Rava. So Rava is going to come and he's going to say, Ikashali, but one second, if I still have a question on this, Hakashali, I still have a question. What's the question? Look at 94b. It says there, Kadim uksatot terakininu. What about Kadim uksatot? Yeah, Kadim, right, are pillows. Yeah, pillows. Pillows and cushions, exactly. Some people, they love them. Yeah. So he says, right, pillows and cushions. He comes and he says like this. 100%. So he says like this, yeah, with the hot chocolate. He says karim uksatot, right? What does that mean exactly? He says over here that they're going to be very, very rach, right? Now, and by the way, this is a proof. This is a proof against some people nowadays. They like their extra firm pillows that are hard like a rock, right? But here it's the rakim minhu. They're very, very soft. So he comes and he says like this. He says, since they're always made from soft leather, right, in order that you could lie down on them. So he says, we learned on them, shel or, so here we're talking about the soft leathers, and again, all of a sudden your pillow got dirty. And what are you allowed to do on Shabbat? You're allowed just to pour water on it, and by pouring on water, you get rid of the dirt. So again, you don't even have to come and start scrubbing. You just come, pour water, and that's it. There's no problem. So if it's going to be 1 second. So he says like this. So if we're talking about right that you're going to come and you're allowed to put water ad shetichle, so he says ela amarava, but rather he comes and he says, but rather Rava says kol kibus dele le kiskus lo sheme kibus. He comes and he says like this. He says any type of a kibus that you don't have to actually start rubbing, it's not considered kibus. And therefore he says, just stop pouring the water on top of the or, there's no problem. Right? So that's what he says. He just stop pouring the water is not a problem because you did not do any type of scrubbing. So as long as you didn't do any scrubbing, that's called shtifa. Shtifa with water by itself is not considered a kibus. So ask the Gemara, says the Gemara, he says here we were actually shotef the water with water. He says shichshuch in kibus lo. It's mashma shtifa, yes, but not kibus, which is done with scrubbing, right? So he says 1 second. If it's kirakin, if it's going to be with orach, divrei akol, so then it's going to be according to everybody. And ibe kashin, if it's going to be with hard shoes, right? Hard leather. So he says v'ka'acherim, then it's going like the shita of the acherim, right? So he says 1 second. If it's going to be like this, if this is what you're telling me now, iachi begedami. So then it should be the exact same thing. What to do with a beged? What does that mean? I should be able to pour water on a beged, right? Without just how do you call this? Without scrubbing. Just pour water and don't do scrubbing. So answers the Gemara. There's a difference between a beged and or. Beged shriato zeu kibuso. By a beged, the beged shriato zeu kibuso. What does that mean? To do with the clothing, right? Shriato zeu kibuso. By the way, you should know many times this happens, and this is a very big avera, right? Which a lot of people don't realize. Let's say, for example, a child. No, lo resoto, ze mitaken oto. Right? He comes and he says this. For example, let's say you've got a clothing that gets dirty. What is the first thing that you do? You soak it in water. Why do you soak it in water? Because when you soak it in water, that's already the first starting of the process of the cleaning. So therefore, right away you're going to do that. Now putting that, no shriato zeu kibiso, right? You're right. You're talking about libun also, but 1 minute, right? So he says like this. So he says shriato zeu kibiso. What does that mean? The second that you put the clothing into water, that's already kibus. That's already considered kibus, but that's not going to be by or. That's going to be by a beged, not by or. So, yeah. So he says verava letamen. Rava goes according to his reasoning. Dama Rava, but Rava says zarak sudar lemain. The fact that you threw a sudar into water, you're going to be chayav chatat. So, sudar is like any type of a cloth, any type of a. It used to be like a handkerchief or like a mufanda, like a. No. So that was like more of a handkerchief or like a scarf, things like that. So he says, right, zarak pishtan lemaim, he's going to be chayav, right? Also the same thing if he's going to throw pishtan, zri pishtan. We're talking about the seeds of pishtan into the water, you're also going to be chayav. So bishma sudar, I understand the sudar, avid kibus, you're going to do, right? It's a todovar, right? He says avad kibus, he comes and he says that in itself is going to be kibus. Ela zera pishtan my tama. What's the reason if you're going to put the zera pishtan into the water? It's the same halacha. The chitim, if you're going to tell me na mishum de mikadach, he says it's because it starts sprouting forth. Yachi chitim v'sarenami. So then the chitim v'sodim is going to be the same halacha. So he says no. Hanach, these the zire pishtan itleu rirei. They've got ririm which come outside b'shriyatam emayim, which means that they come and they start attaching themselves together. So since they come and they start attaching themselves together, so therefore you're going to be over on a melacha, which we're going to have to say which melacha exactly. So says the Gemara, so shlachim nami. So also you should be chayav when you're going to come and you're going to put water, right, on top of these things that they come and they stick together. So he says, no, they're going to be chayav mishum lisha. Meaning lisha is when you come and you knead things together. What is lisha? Lash. Lash is you take the water and the flour, you put them together, you're chayav and lash. So therefore, anything which is domet to lash is the same thing. Here we're talking about is you've got zire pishtan. Zire pishtan are the seeds of like flax. So when you come and you put them in water, they come and they start attaching themselves to each other, right? So then you're going to be chayav, huh? Yeah, like rice. That they come and they start getting sucked to each other. So that's called lash. Okay, that's the av melacha. Darash Rava. Rava comes in here and he says like this: Mutar lechabes minal b'Shabbat. You're allowed to wash a shoe on Shabbat. Now again, usually, right, we're talking about of or. Elmaleh of Papa Rava. V'amar of Chia Barashi Zimnin Saganim v'Kamim the Rava was many times in front of Rav v'Shachshich le'Misadim b'Maya, and they used to wash his shoes on Shabbat. Shichshuch in aval kibus lo, only shichshuch, not kibus, meaning only when you're going to pour the water on it, but not that you're going to come and you're going to start scrubbing. So he says, Hadar Uki Rava, right? Uki Rava, Mora Allah v'Darash. Then they came and they were Medoresh. Tvarim shamarti lifnechem tautem biyadi. It's a mistake. Beram, however, though, Kach amru. This is what they said. Shichshuch is mutar, kibus is asur. You're only allowed to do shichshuch, which is going to be again what? Shtifa, pouring water, but not scrubbing. That's going to be asur. Okay. There's the two dots. A kibbutz. We're talking about where do you wash the clothing. So the kibbutz stuff has to be b'makom kadosh, in a holy place. Okay, so he says over here like this. He says, "Menanimile." How do we know that you have to wash it in a holy place? Because it says in a braita, "Techabes b'makom kadosh." So it says mefurash. You have to do it. So where's makom kadosh? In the azara, in the Bet Hamikdash. So he says, "Shvirat kli cheretz minayin." How do you know that when you're going to come and you're going to have the kli cheretz that you have to break to do with the basar, which is basar chatash nibashel? How do you know that's also b'makom kadosh? Tamulomar uchli cheretz asher tevashe bo chatat yishaver. Right? And he says, "Merikau shtifa bekli nechoshet minayin." How do you know also by merikau shtifa bekli nechoshet? So he says, so since it says again with the Vava Chibur, it teaches you that all these things have to be done with, bimakom kadosh. So it has to be done in a holy place. Okay, this is a chumrah of a chatat more than all the kodesh kodashim, right? So he says like this. He says, "Vetu leka." Are you going to tell me that the only place is by a chatat, right? That's the only one of the kodesh kodashim that we're talking about over here. He says, "Va'ika nichnasta malifnim." He says, one second, you've got another chumrah. You know what the other chumrah is, right? You've got another chumrah that the blood goes inside of the Hechal, right? No other blood goes inside of the Hechal. Meaning, if you're already comparing all the kodesh kodashim, kodesh kadashim, right? Which is basically, which ones are kodesh kadashim? Chatat, Ola, Asham, Shamim, Shamim. It's not Chalabim, Shamim, Asham. Yeah? Chatat, Ola, and Asham. Correct? Yeah, very good. Kol hakavod. You guys are on the ball. So he says over here like this. So he says, right, the chatat is the only one which the blood goes on the inside. So if the blood is going to the inside, that's already another chumrah. So answers the Gemara, b'chataot chitzoniyot. No. We're only talking about the chataot chitzoniyot. Because if you're talking about the chataot primiyot, which go inside, obviously the blood is in the inside. Obviously, it's another case. So here we're talking about the chataot on the outside. There's a special chumrah, which is not like any other type of the kodesh kadashim. So says the Gemara, Shim nichnasta malifnim psula. We said that if the blood came on the inside of the Hechal, it becomes pasul, right? But not by the other kodesh kodashim. So he says, so his answer is like Rabbi Akiva, Damar, kol adam nichnas lechal chaper psula. Says any blood which goes inside becomes pasul, according to Shitat Rabbi Akiva. Meaning, doesn't matter whether it's an asham, olah, burnt offering, guilt offering, the second the blood comes inside, that's it becomes pasul. Yeah, you listening? Yeah? Okay, very good. So he says, Shekem mechaprim al chayve kritut. So he says, they're going to be mechaper on chayve kritut, right? So what does that mean? Bechatat deshmiat hakol. So he says, what does that mean that it's going to be mechaper on, right, on kritut? He says the other ones are not mechaper. You remember the only one which is mechaper on chayve kritut was going to be the chatat. So he comes and he says, bechatat deshmiat kol. We're talking about a chatat of shmiat kol, which is olev yored, shivuat ha'edut. And therefore, that's the one we were talking about, that it's not mechaper on a karet. Meaning, usually, right, one more time, usually, in order to bring a korban chatat, it has to be shigrato chatat, vezedono karet. Zedono karet means that if you did it purposely, you're chayav karet, and if you did it accidentally, you're going to be chayav a korban chatat, a sin offering. So, for example, Shabbat, somebody that's mechalel Shabbat. When somebody's mechalel Shabbat, chas v'shalom, obviously, if there's witnesses and there's a warning, they get sekilah. Let's say there's no warning or there's no witnesses. So therefore, he gets karet. I can't kill him, right? Remember, in order to kill, you need both. You need also witnesses, two witnesses, kosher witnesses, plus you need a warning. If I lack any of those two factors, I cannot kill him. But what is there? There's still karet. So since there's a karet for somebody that's mechalel Shabbat, kol ha'oseh bo melacha, right? Anybody that's going to come and do melacha on Shabbat, they're going to get karet. So therefore, if they do it accidentally, a person is going to be mechalel Shabbat. What does he bring? A korban chatat. So here the Gemara is going to say there's one chatat which is an exception to this rule. That's kol chatat al shmiat kol. What is shmiat kol? A person comes and he made shivuat ayedut. He testified falsely. So that on that shmiat kol, that he let his voice be heard, right? And if he did it and he basically lied, so what does he have to bring? He has to bring a korban chatat. That chatat is not mechaper on a karet, because there's no karet here, right? So therefore, that's the exception to the rule that we're talking about, that there's no karet involved. So he says, right? What? Yeah. So he says like this. He says, "Sheken tuna arba matanot." So he says, right? We're talking about right now. There's another one also, another chumra by chatat. The chatat you have to put arba matanot. You remember by the other ones, you only have to do shte matanot shehen arba. How do you do shte matanot shehen arba? Yeah. The corners, very good. The keren, very good. The keren, and then it goes to both sides. From the outside, you take the two corners, the two corners, and then it becomes like this. No, inside it's four. Inside you for sure it's four. For sure. The mizbeach b'nimi for sure it's four. On the outside, usually it's two, which becomes four. But the chatat many times is going to become four. So he says sheken tuna arba matanot on the mizbeach, and the other kodesh kodashim is only going to be shtaim shenaba. So answers the Gemara like Rabbi Ishmael. What does it mean like Rabbi Ishmael? Tamar kol adamim tunim arba matanot. According to Rabbi Ishmael, everything always needs four matanot, not two, which becomes four. According to Rabbi Ishmael, you always need four. Okay, so he says al arba kranot. He says you need on the four kranot. And according to reasoning, haika also in keren, right? Haika etzba, right? Haika chuda. He says chad mitlat michumra nakat. You're right. According to your svara that you're already telling me now about how many sprinklings and everything else, you also have the keren of the mizbeach, and you also have that it has to be done with the etzba, with a finger, and you also need that to be done on the corner, on the zavit of the mizbeach. So he says these are all different chumrot that we're talking about, only davka by the chatat. So he says you're right. In a chanami, we'd only mention one out of the three, right? We could have mentioned these ones as well, but we only mentioned one out of the three of the chumrot. But again, if we're going like according to Rabbi Ishmael, everything always needs arba matanot, and therefore it doesn't actually exist. Okay, fine. Mishnah on the bottom of Tzadik Daled Mubet. 94b, the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Beged sheyatza chutz l'klaim. When you have a clothing that went outside of the curtains, right? Nichnasu mchabso b'makom kadosh. So what happens is, if it went outside of the azara, remember the curtains that you have the azara, it went outside. Now before they washed it. So nichnas, you bring it inside, mchabso b'makom kadosh, and you wash it in the makom kadosh. Nitma. What happens if it becomes tameh? Right? Chutz l'klaim. So now koreo, you have to destroy it, right? Because when you destroy it, now you got rid of the tumah. Nichnas umchabso b'makom kadosh, right? Now, when you're going to bring it in, you're going to wash it, right? And then you bring it in, you're going to wash it. Okay? So he says over here, right? He says, yeah, kli cheres sheyatza chutz l'klaim. So he says, if you have a kli cheres that comes outside of the klaim, nichnas v'shovro b'makom kodsho. So you're going to come and you're going to break it in a place of kadosh. Nitma chutz l'klaim, nokvo. So he comes and he says like this. He says, nokvo, right? V'nichnas v'shovro b'makom kadosh. Right? You're going to come, you're going to make a nekev. Right? Why? In order to, because basically what we're talking about right now is that if you break it, so now again, it's going to become, so if you've got, which one? Yeah, by breaking it. Yeah, so that you destroy the kli. Once you destroy the kli, again, you got rid of the tumah. Once you got rid of the tumah, now you can bring it in, right? And you do it in makom kadosh. Kli nechoshet sheyatza chutz l'klaim nichnas u'melko v'shotvo b'makom kadosh. You bring it back and you're going to wash it. Nitma chutz l'klaim, but if it becomes tameh, pochato, right? Again, you're going to make it less. How do you make it less here? It says here kli matech kemen shu chashuv. It's not just enough just to make a nekev. You have to make a chor gadol. That's pochato. You have to make a big hole. Okay, and then nichnas umurko v'shotfo b'makom kadosh, and you're going to come and you're going to bring it into a makom kadosh. Matkif la Ravina. Ravina comes and he asks the following question: Kor'o, when you're going to come and you're going to tear a beged amachmanan, it says in the Torah, beged, v'lav begadu. It's not a beged. So what does that mean? That means how are you going to do kibus if it's not a clothing anymore? Why did you break the clothing in order that what? That it's not tameh. But the second that you break it, it's not a beged. So if it's not a beged, how are you washing it? It said you have to wash the beged in a makom kadosh. The second that you tore it in order to get rid of the tum'ah. But the second that you tore it, it's not a beged. The second it's not a beged. What does it mean now? What's it going to help? That you're going to bring it back inside. So he says here, you left the size, meaning even though you came and you tore it, you still left the size that is still enough for some type of a clothing. So says the Gemara, any is it so? Ravuna says, it is considered a chibur, right? That you could put the two of them together, right? So says the Gemara, midrabanan, it's only going to be midrabanan.